You don't need to escape the digital world to find God. But if you're not careful, the digital world will quietly, slowly, replace him. Not all at once, not in an obvious way, but in small, almost invisible moments. A notification instead of a prayer, scrolling instead of stillness, noise instead of reflection. And before you realize it, your attention has shifted, your focus has changed, your inner life has been rearranged. We are living in a time where spirituality is everywhere, more accessible than ever before, more visible than ever before, more talked about than ever before. You can open your phone and instantly find teachings, sermons, meditations, reflections, wisdom that once required years of seeking, now delivered in seconds. You can download peace, stream sermons, follow spiritual voices from around the world, and yet, so many people still feel empty, still restless, still disconnected from God, because something deeper is missing. And this is the part most people don't realize. Just because you are surrounded by spiritual content does not mean you are spiritually grounded. Just because you are listening does not mean you are changing. Just because you feel inspired in a moment does not mean you are being transformed. Because access is not the same as transformation, information is not the same as intimacy, and exposure is not the same as encounter. You can know about God and still not walk with Him. You can hear truth and still not live it. And in a world that constantly feeds your mind, your soul can still remain untouched. That is the tension of this generation. We are more spiritually connected than ever before, yet more spiritually distracted than ever. And deep down, you can feel it. Something isn't right. We are the first generation in history where spiritual knowledge is no longer distant, hidden, or difficult to access. It is instant. What previous generations had to seek through long journeys, deep discipline, and sacred commitment is now available within seconds, anytime, anywhere. Teachings inspired by traditions like Buddhism and Hinduism are no longer confined to temples, monasteries, or sacred spaces. They now exist inside your phone, packaged into short videos, bite-sized lessons, and endless streams of content. You no longer need to sit under a spiritual teacher for years to begin learning. You can scroll through wisdom in minutes. You don't have to withdraw from the world to reflect. You can engage spirituality while multitasking between messages, notifications, and distractions. Meditation apps now guide your breathing step by step. Online sermons bring powerful messages directly to your ears. Virtual communities give you connection without physical presence. And even AI-generated reflections can sound deeply insightful, offering guidance that feels personal and immediate. On the surface, this looks like a spiritual revolution. And in many ways, it is. Barriers have been removed. Access has been expanded. The door to spiritual awareness is now open to anyone with a device. But beneath this convenience, something subtle is shifting. Spirituality is being reshaped to match the speed of the digital world. Depth is being compressed into quick consumption. Wisdom is being shortened into digestible content. Sacred practices are being adapted to fit into busy, distracted lives, and without even realizing it, we begin to approach our relationship with God the same way we approach everything else online, quickly, casually, on demand. We consume spiritual content the way we consume entertainment, scrolling, skipping, saving, but rarely sitting with it long enough for it to truly change us. Because true spiritual transformation was never designed to happen at the speed of convenience. It was designed to happen in stillness, in patience, in quiet moments where there are no interruptions, no noise competing for your attention. But the digital world does not encourage stillness. It rewards speed, stimulation, and constant engagement. So while you are gaining more access to spiritual knowledge than ever before, you may be losing something far more important: depth. You feel spiritually connected because you are constantly exposed to truth. But you also feel spiritually distracted because that truth is never given space to take root within you. And this is the hidden tension of this generation. We are surrounded by spiritual light, but struggling to sit in it long enough to be transformed by it. Because convenience can introduce you to God, but it cannot sustain intimacy with Him. Intimacy requires something the digital world cannot automate: presence, attention, time, and those are the very things being quietly eroded every time your focus is pulled in a different direction. Technology is designed to capture your attention. God is revealed through your awareness. That difference may seem small, but it changes everything. Because attention is something that can be taken from you. Awareness is something you must choose. And in the digital world, your attention is constantly under attack. Every app is competing for it. Every notification is trying to interrupt it. Every scroll is designed to keep you engaged just a little longer. Not by accident, but by design. These systems are built to keep your mind moving from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next. And over time, your mind adapts. It becomes faster, but shallower, more stimulated, but less centered, always active, but rarely at peace. Your phone trains your mind to react. You hear a sound, you check. You feel a vibration, you respond. You see something new, you engage instantly. There is no pause, no space, no depth, but your spirit is called to be still. Stillness is where reflection begins. Stillness is where clarity forms. Stillness is where God becomes real, not just known, but experienced. Yet stillness has become uncomfortable for many people. Silence feels empty. Waiting feels unnatural. Being alone with your thoughts feels restless. So instead of sitting in stillness, we reach for distraction. And slowly, without realizing it, we lose the ability to remain present. Every notification pulls you outward, outward into noise, outward into comparison, outward into endless information that fills your mind but rarely feeds your soul. But every moment with God calls you inward, inward into reflection, inward into truth, inward into a deeper awareness that cannot be rushed or forced. And here's the tension. You are living in a world that constantly pulls you away from the very state required to experience God. So even when you desire Him, your environment is training you to move in the opposite direction. This is why you can spend hours engaging with spiritual content and still feel disconnected. Because attention is not the same as awareness. You can pay attention to something without truly absorbing it. You can hear truth without allowing it to settle within you. You can be inspired for a moment and distracted the next. Awareness, on the other hand, requires presence. It requires you to slow down enough to notice what is happening within you, to sit with truth long enough for it to challenge you, to remain in a moment long enough for it to transform you. But transformation does not happen in constant motion. It happens in stillness. And that is why this is the silent battle of this generation, not between good and evil in the obvious sense, but between distraction and devotion, between a life that is constantly reacting and a life that is intentionally aware. Because distraction keeps you busy, but devotion makes you present. Distraction fills your time, but devotion fills your soul. And in the end, your spiritual life will not be shaped by what you occasionally focus on, but by what consistently holds your attention. You can listen to sermons every day and still not change. You can follow spiritual content consistently and still feel distant from God. You can fill your mind with truth and yet find your life untouched by it. Because spiritual growth is not measured by what you consume, but by what you embody. And this is where many people become quietly confused. Because in the digital world, consumption feels like progress. The more you watch, the more you feel like you're growing. The more you listen, the more you feel like you understand. The more content you absorb, the more spiritually aware you think you are. But understanding something is not the same as becoming it. You can understand patience and still be impatient. You can understand humility and still operate in pride. You can understand faith and still live in fear. Because transformation does not happen through exposure alone. It happens through application, through repetition, through intentional change in how you live, think, and respond. And that process cannot be rushed. Digital spirituality often creates the illusion of growth. You feel enlightened in the moment, moved by a message, inspired by a teaching, stirred by a powerful idea. But once the video ends, once the sound fades, once the next notification appears, that feeling disappears with it, and nothing actually changes. Your habits remain the same. Your reactions remain the same. Your patterns remain the same. So you return again, looking for another message, another video, another moment of inspiration, not realizing that you are cycling through information without stepping into transformation. Because transformation is slower. It requires you to sit with truth long after the message ends, to confront yourself honestly, to adjust your behavior intentionally. It asks more from you than just listening. It asks for participation. And this is where digital culture creates resistance, because everything around you is designed for speed, ease, and comfort. But true spirituality demands what this environment avoids: discipline. The discipline to show up even when you don't feel inspired. The discipline to practice truth daily, not just hear it occasionally. Silence. The willingness to sit without distraction, to reflect, to process, to allow truth to settle deeply within you. Surrender. Letting go of control. Releasing old patterns, allowing God to reshape parts of you that are uncomfortable to change. These things cannot be downloaded. They cannot be skipped. They cannot be consumed passively. They must be lived. And this is the turning point. The moment you realize that spiritual growth is not about how much you know, but about how much you are willing to become. Because information will fill your mind, but only transformation will change your life. After all the distraction, after all the noise, after all the endless consumption, there comes a moment where you realize, if you don't intentionally rebuild your spiritual life, the digital world will quietly dismantle it. Because what it slowly weakens is not your belief in God, but your consistency with Him. And without consistency, even the strongest spiritual desire begins to fade. So if you truly want to master your spiritual life in this environment, you must rebuild what the digital world constantly tries to break: sacred consistency. Not occasional moments of inspiration, but daily, intentional connection. Not random exposure to truth, but disciplined engagement with it. Because spiritual depth is not built in intensity, it is built in consistency. And that requires structure. It means setting aside time where God is not competing with your phone, not multitasking your prayer while scrolling, not dividing your attention between Him and everything else, but creating moments where your focus is undivided. Because divided attention produces shallow connection. And God is not found in divided spaces. It means practicing prayer without interruption, not rushed words spoken out of routine, but intentional communication that comes from stillness. Moments where you are not trying to finish quickly, but willing to stay longer, to listen, to reflect, to become aware of His presence. Because prayer is not just speaking, it is aligning, and alignment takes time. It also means creating space for stillness where your soul can finally breathe. Moments without noise, without input, without constant stimulation, because your soul has been carrying more than you realize. And without stillness, it never gets the chance to release, reset, and reconnect. This is where clarity begins. This is where conviction deepens. This is where God's presence becomes real, not just an idea, but an experience. But here is the challenge. Stillness will feel uncomfortable at first, because your mind has been trained to expect constant input. Silence may feel empty. Slowness may feel unnatural. You may even feel the urge to reach for your phone without thinking. That is not weakness. That is conditioning. And breaking that conditioning is part of your spiritual discipline, because every time you choose stillness over distraction, you are retraining your mind to return to awareness. Every time you resist the urge to fill silence, you are creating space for God to meet you. This is how sacred practice is rebuilt, not through dramatic moments, but through small, consistent decisions repeated daily. And over time, something begins to shift. God is no longer just something you listen to. He becomes someone you walk with, no longer just content you watch, but a presence you live with, a presence you carry into your day, into your decisions, into your thoughts, because spiritual maturity begins the moment God is no longer separate from your life, but central to it. At this point, it's easy to assume that the solution is to reject the digital world entirely, to disconnect, to withdraw, to escape it. But that's not the answer. Because technology is not the enemy. It is a tool. And like any tool, its impact depends on how it is used. The same device that distracts you can also guide you. The same platform that drains your attention can also expose you to truth. You can use it to learn, to access teachings that deepen your understanding of God, to revisit messages that challenge and refine your thinking, to grow in wisdom from voices you may never have encountered otherwise. You can use it to connect, to be part of spiritual communities that encourage you, to share your journey with others who are seeking growth, to find support in moments when you feel alone or uncertain. You can use it to stay grounded. Listening to sermons, engaging in guided prayer, surrounding your mind with content that lifts your focus toward God. In this way, technology can become a bridge, not a barrier. But here is where awareness becomes critical. If you do not intentionally control how you engage with it, it will begin to control how you think, feel, and live, not suddenly, not aggressively, but slowly, quietly. It will shape your habits, shorten your attention span, redefine your sense of focus, and before you realize it, your inner life starts to reflect the chaos of your digital environment, restless, distracted, fragmented. That is why mastery is not about rejection. It is about intentional use. It is about setting boundaries that protect your awareness, choosing when to engage and when to step away, deciding what you allow into your mind and what you refuse to entertain. Being present with technology without becoming dependent on it. Because when you are not intentional, technology doesn't just occupy your time. It occupies your thoughts. It fills the quiet spaces where reflection should happen. It replaces moments where awareness could deepen. It interrupts the stillness where God often speaks. So the goal is not to remove technology from your life, but to put it in its rightful place. A tool, not a master. A resource, not a replacement. Something you use with awareness, not something that unconsciously uses you. Because true spiritual mastery in this generation looks different. It is not about escaping the world. It is about walking through it with clarity, being surrounded by noise, but remaining centered, having access to everything, but choosing what truly matters, living in a fast-paced environment, but maintaining a steady, grounded spirit. That is the balance. To live in the digital world without letting the digital world live inside you. In today's digital world, spirituality is no longer only practiced, it is also performed. For many people, spirituality has slowly shifted from a private transformation into a public identity. Something you show, not something you become. You see it everywhere. People posting quotes about peace, sharing deep spiritual insights, reposting wisdom about enlightenment, awareness, and divine connection, curating an image of being awake, aligned, or elevated. And on the surface, it looks inspiring. It looks like growth. It looks like awareness. But beneath the surface, something deeper is often missing. Private depth. Because there is a difference between being spiritually expressive and being spiritually transformed. Between speaking about God and walking with God. Between appearing awakened online and being anchored in truth when no one is watching. This is where the digital world creates a subtle distortion. It rewards visibility. It rewards expression. It rewards appearance. So it becomes easy to confuse being seen with being changed. But spiritual growth was never meant to be validated by an audience. It was meant to be formed in silence. And this is where the danger begins. When your spiritual identity becomes something you maintain publicly, but do not cultivate privately. When you know how to sound deep, but struggle to live deeply. when you can share wisdom, but do not consistently apply it in your own life. This is one of the most dangerous deceptions of this generation, looking spiritual without becoming spiritual. Because appearance can be maintained with repetition, but transformation requires confrontation. Confrontation with your habits, confrontation with your thoughts, confrontation with the parts of you that no one else sees. And that kind of work cannot be performed. It must be lived. God is not impressed by what you display publicly, not by how many spiritual posts you share, not by how deeply your captions sound, not by how enlightened your online presence appears. He is concerned with something far more hidden: who you are in secret, who you are when there is no audience, when there is no validation, when there is no digital identity to maintain. Because that is where truth is revealed, in the private moments, in the unseen choices, in the quiet consistency of your inner life. And this is the part many people overlook. A strong digital spiritual identity can still exist alongside a weak inner spiritual life. But eventually, the gap becomes noticeable. Because what is not rooted privately cannot remain stable publicly. So the real question is not, how spiritual do I appear? But rather, what is actually happening in my private life with God? Because that is where true spirituality is formed, not in performance, not in perception, but in hidden, consistent devotion that no one else may ever see except God. The digital age hasn't weakened spirituality. It has exposed something deeper about the human heart. It has revealed who is truly seeking God and who is simply surrounded by spiritual information. Because now, more than ever, spirituality is no longer hidden. It is everywhere, accessible, constant, unavoidable. And yet, despite all this access, something remains unchanged in many lives: a lack of depth, a lack of stillness, a lack of true inner transformation. And this is why the real shift in this generation is not informational. It is intentional. Because in a world where everything is available instantly, choosing God can no longer be accidental. It can no longer be something you drift into, or something you do out of routine, or something you engage with only when it feels convenient. It now requires a decision, a conscious turning of the heart, a deliberate return to presence, a willingness to prioritize what is eternal over what is immediate, not out of habit. Because habit can become empty, not out of convenience, because convenience always bends toward distraction, but out of hunger. A deep inner recognition that something more is needed, something deeper than constant stimulation, something more real than endless information. And this hunger is where true spiritual transformation begins. Because spiritual mastery in this generation is not about escaping the world. It is about learning how to remain spiritually anchored within it. It is learning how to be present in a distracted world, where everything is competing for your attention, yet you choose to stay aware of what truly matters. Be silent in a noisy culture, where silence feels unnatural, yet you intentionally create space to hear beyond the noise. Be grounded while everything moves fast, where life is constantly accelerating, yet your spirit remains steady, centered, and unshaken. This is not easy, because everything around you is designed to pull you outward, to fragment your focus, to keep your mind engaged but your soul untouched. But deeper intimacy with God is not found in speed. It is found in stillness. It is found in returning again and again to that inner place where awareness replaces distraction and presence replaces noise. And in that place, something begins to change. Not just what you know about God, but how you experience Him. Not just what you consume spiritually, but how deeply you are transformed by it. Because the goal was never just access. The goal was always intimacy. And intimacy with God is not built in moments of intensity. It is built in moments of consistency, in quiet decisions, in repeated return, in choosing Him again, even when everything else feels easier. So the call of this generation is not to escape the digital world, but to rise above its pull, to live within it, without being shaped by it, to move through it without losing your center, to engage with it without losing your awareness of God. Because in the end, the question is not how much you have seen, heard, or consumed, but how deeply you have remained with Him. The digital world is not slowing down. It will continue to move faster. It will continue to expand. It will continue to produce more content, more voices, more opinions, more distractions. Every day there will be something new to watch, learn, react to, or consume. And in the middle of all of that movement, it becomes easy to believe that you must also move faster to keep up. But your spirit was never designed for speed. It was designed for depth. Depth cannot be rushed. Depth cannot be optimized. Depth cannot be replaced by information or stimulation. Because while the digital world pulls you outward, your spiritual life is calling you inward, to a place of stillness, to a place of awareness, to a place where everything unnecessary begins to fall away. And in that place, something becomes clear. You don't need more content. You don't need more information. You don't need more voices competing for your attention. You don't need more insights that fade as quickly as they come. What you truly need is something deeper than consumption. You need connection with God. Not occasional connection, not surface-level connection, but a connection that shapes how you think, how you live, and how you respond to life itself. Because content can fill your mind, but only connection can anchor your soul. And in a world where everything is speaking at once, offering opinions, interpretations, and endless perspectives, it becomes more important than ever to recognize what truly matters. Because not every voice deserves your attention. Not every message deserves your agreement. Not every influence deserves space in your inner world. But there is one voice, one presence, that remains constant, steady, and unchanging. And it is the only voice that can truly transform your life from within, not by adding noise, but by bringing clarity, not by overwhelming you, but by grounding you, not by distracting you, but by calling you back to what is real. And so, in the end, the invitation is simple, but profound. To slow down in a world that never stops. To go deeper in a culture that stays on the surface. To choose presence over pressure. And to choose God over constant distraction. Because when everything else fades, what remains is not what you consumed, but who you became in the process.